The Tale of the Merchant and the Genie. It is said that there was once a merchant with great wealth and many dealings in various lands. One day, he mounted his horse and went out to trade in some of these lands. As the heat became unbearable, he sat under a tree and ate a date he had with him. When he finished eating the date, he threw the date pit, and suddenly a huge genie appeared, holding a sword. The genie said, "Stand up so I can kill you, just as you killed my son." The merchant, astonished, asked, "Your son?" The genie replied, "When you threw the date pit, it struck my son's chest, killing him instantly." The merchant said to the genie, "Know, O genie, that I have much wealth, children, and a wife, and I have debts to settle. Allow me to return to my home, give everyone their due, and then I will return to you. I give you my word and a solemn promise that I will come back to you, and you may do with me as you please." The genie took his word and released him. The merchant returned to his country, settled all his affairs, paid his debts, and informed his wife and children of what had happened. They wept, as did all his family, women, and children. He made his will and stayed with them until the end of the year. Then, he set out, carrying his shroud under his arm, bid farewell to his family and neighbors, and left against his will. He walked until he reached that orchard. That day was the first day of the new year. As he sat there weeping over what would happen to him, an old man approached him with a chained gazelle. The old man greeted the merchant and asked him, "What is the reason for your sitting here alone in this place, which is a dwelling for jinn?" The merchant told him about what had happened with the genie and why he was sitting in this place. The old man with the gazelle was astonished and said, "Oh my brother, your story is truly strange, and your debt is indeed great." The old man then sat beside him and said, "Oh my brother, I will not leave you until I see what happens to you with this genie." He sat with him, talking, and the merchant fainted from fear and severe distress, while the old man with the gazelle remained by his side. Soon, another old man approached them, accompanied by 2 black dogs. After greeting them, he asked about the reason for their sitting in this place, which is a dwelling for jinn. They told him the story from beginning to end. No sooner had they finished when a third old man arrived, accompanied by a mule. He greeted them and asked why they were sitting in this place. They told him the story as well. And behold, a dust storm arose, and a great whirlwind came from the midst of that wilderness. As the dust cleared, there appeared that very genie with a drawn sword in his hand. He approached them, seized the merchant from among them, and said to him, "Stand up so I may kill you." The merchant wept, and the 3 old men cried out in grief and lamentation. The first old man, who was the owner of the gazelle, stepped forward, kissed the genie's hand, and said, "O mighty genie, king of the jinn, if I tell you my story with this gazelle and you find it amazing, will you grant me 1/3 of this merchant's blood?" The genie replied, "Yes, if your story is indeed strange and wonderful, I will grant you 1/3 of his blood." The first old man then said, "Know, O genie, that this gazelle is the daughter of my uncle, of my flesh and blood. I married her when she was still young, and we lived together for about 30 years without having any children. I then married another woman, who bore me a son. This son grew up little by little until he reached the age of 15. Then I had to travel to some distant cities. During my absence, my cousin, who is now this gazelle, learned the arts of magic and enchantment. She transformed my son into a calf and his mother, the maidservant, into a cow, and handed them over to the shepherd. After a long journey, I returned home and asked about my son and his mother. She told me, "Your wife has died, and your son has run away, I do not know where he went." I spent a whole year mourning, with a sorrowful heart and tearful eyes, until the festival of sacrifice came. I sent for the shepherd and asked him to bring me a fat cow. He brought me a fat cow, which was actually my wife whom this gazelle had enchanted. I took the knife in my hand and prepared to slaughter her. But the cow cried and wailed so pitifully that I rose from her and ordered the shepherd to slaughter and skin her. He did so, but found neither fat nor meat, only skin and bones. I regretted killing her, but it was too late for regret. I gave her to the shepherd and said, Bring me a fat calf. He brought me my son, enchanted as a calf. When the calf saw me, he broke his tether, came to me, and rolled at my feet, weeping. I felt compassion for him and said to the shepherd, Leave this calf among the animals. All the while, the genie was marveling at the story of these astonishing events. Then the owner of the gazelle said, O king of the jinn, all of this happened while my cousin, this gazelle, was watching and saying, Slaughter this calf, for it is fat. But I did not slaughter him. Instead, I ordered the shepherd to take him away, and he did. The next day, as I was sitting, the shepherd came to me and said, My lord, I have something to tell you that will bring you joy. May I have a reward? I said, Yes. He said, O merchant, I have a daughter who learned magic from an old woman who lived with us when she was young. Yesterday, when you gave me the calf, I took it to her. My daughter looked at it, covered her face, and wept, then she laughed. I asked her why she wept and laughed, and she said, This calf is the son of our master the merchant, but he has been enchanted by his stepmother, along with his mother, who was turned into the cow you slaughtered. That is why I laughed and cried. I was astounded by this and could hardly wait for the dawn to break so I could come to you and inform you. When I heard the shepherd's words, I went with him, overwhelmed with joy and happiness. We reached his house, where his daughter greeted me and kissed my hand. The calf came to me, rolled at my feet, and wept. I asked the shepherd's daughter, Is what you say about this calf true? She replied, Yes, my lord, he is your son. I said, O girl, if you can free my son, I will give you all the livestock and wealth that your father has under his care. She smiled and said, My lord, I desire no wealth, but I have two conditions, first, that you marry me to him, and second, that I be allowed to enchant the one who enchanted him and keep her captive, otherwise, I will not be safe from her treachery. When I heard her conditions, I said, You shall have all that your father has under his care and more. As for my cousin, her blood is yours to claim. She then took a bowl, filled it with water, chanted over it, and sprinkled it on the calf, saying, If you were created a calf, remain so and do not change. But if you were enchanted, return to your original form by the will of God. And behold, he shook, then became human again. I said to him, By God, tell me everything that my cousin did to you and your mother. He told me all that had happened to them. I said, My son, God has sent you someone to save you and reclaim your right. Then, O Genie, I married him to the shepherd's daughter, and she enchanted my cousin, turning her into this gazelle. I came here and met these people, asked them about their situation, and they told me what had happened to this merchant. So, I stayed to see what would happen, and this is my story. The genie said, This is indeed a marvelous tale, and I grant you 1/3 of his blood. At that moment, the second sheikh, the owner of the 2 dogs, stepped forward and said, Know, O king of the jinn, that these 2 dogs are my brothers, and I am the 3rd. Our father died and left us 3,000 dinars. I opened a shop where I sold and bought goods, while my brother traveled with his merchandise. He was away for a year with the caravans and then returned with nothing. I said to him, Brother, didn't I advise you not to travel? He wept and said, Brother, it was God's will, and there is no benefit in discussing it now. I have nothing left. So I took him to the shop, then to the bathhouse, dressed him in fine clothes, and we ate together. I said to him, Brother, I calculate the profit from my shop annually, and then I divide it without touching the capital between you and me. I calculated the shop's profit and found it to be 2,000 dinars. I praised God and rejoiced greatly. I divided the profit equally between us, and we lived together for a while. After some time, my brothers wanted to travel again and asked me to go with them, but I refused. I said to them, What have you gained from your travels that I should gain? They insisted, but I did not obey them. Instead, we stayed in our shops, selling and buying for a whole year. They kept urging me to travel until 6 full years passed. Finally, I agreed to travel with them and said, Let us calculate what money we have. We calculated it and found it to be 6,000 dinars. I said, we will bury half of it underground so that it will benefit us if something happens, and each of us will take 1,000 dinars. They said, this is a good idea. So I took the money, divided it in half, and buried 3,000 dinars. As for the other 3,000 dinars, I gave each of us 1,000 dinars, and we prepared goods, bought a ship, loaded our belongings onto it, and traveled for a full month until we entered a city. We sold our goods and made a profit of 10 dinars for each dinar. Then, as we were preparing to leave, we found a young woman on the shore who kissed my hand and said, "O my master, do you have kindness and generosity for which I can reward you?" I said, "Yes, I have kindness and generosity, even if you do not reward me." She said, "O my master, marry me and take me to your country, for I have given myself to you. Do good to me, for I am someone who repays kindness and generosity. Do not be deceived by my appearance." When I heard her words, my heart softened towards her for reasons known to God. I took her, dressed her, and arranged a comfortable place for her on the ship. I showed her great kindness and attention. As we traveled, my heart grew deeply attached to her, and I could not bear to be away from her, neglecting my brothers. They became envious of me and my wealth, and they coveted all of my possessions. They conspired to kill me and take my wealth. They said, "We will kill our brother, and all the money will be ours." Then Satan made their deeds appear attractive to them, so they came to me while I was sleeping beside my wife. They carried us and threw us into the sea. When my wife woke up, she transformed into a genie, carried me to an island, and disappeared for a while. She returned at dawn. She said to me, "I am your wife who saved you from being killed by the grace of God. Know that I am a genie who saw you and fell in love with you. I appeared to you in the form you saw, and you married me. Now I have saved you from drowning. I am angry with your brothers and must kill them." When I heard her story, I was astonished and thanked her for her actions. I said to her, "As for the death of my brothers, it should not happen." I then told her everything that had happened between my brothers and me from the beginning. When she heard my words, she said, "Tonight, I will fly to them, sink their ship, and destroy them." I pleaded with her, saying, "By God, do not do that, as the proverb says, O doer of good to one who has wronged, the wrongdoer's actions are enough. They are still my brothers after all." She said, "They must be killed." I begged her, and eventually, she carried me and flew, placing me on the roof of my house. I opened the doors, retrieved what I had hidden under the ground, and reopened my shop after greeting the people. I bought goods, and when night came, I entered my house and found these 2 dogs tied up inside. When they saw me, they approached and clung to me. I was surprised, and then my wife appeared and said, "These are your brothers." I asked, "Who did this to them?" She said, "I sent word to my sister, and she did this to them. They will not be released until after 10 years. So I came here, traveling to seek their release after they had spent 10 years in this state. Then I met this young man, who told me his story, so I decided to stay and see what would happen between you and him. This is my story." The genie said, "This is indeed a strange tale, and I grant you 1/3 of his blood in his crime." Then the third sheikh, the owner of the mule, stepped forward and said to the genie, "I will tell you a story stranger than the stories of the 2 others, and you will grant me the remainder of his blood and crime, O genie." The genie said, "Yes." The sheikh said, "O Sultan and chief of the jinn, this mule was my wife. I traveled and was absent from her for a full year. When my journey ended, I came to her at night and found a black slave lying with her in bed, talking, laughing, and kissing. When she saw me, she hastily got up and came to me with a jug of water, spoke over it, and sprinkled me, saying, 'Come out of this form into the form of a dog.' I immediately turned into a dog, and she drove me out of the house. I went out and kept walking until I reached a butcher's shop. I approached and started eating from the bones. When the butcher saw me, he took me into his house. When his daughter saw me, she covered her face with me. She said, "You bring a man to us and bring him into our home?" Her father said, "Where is the man?" She said, "This dog was enchanted by his wife, and I can release him." When her father heard her words, he said, "By God, my daughter, release him." She took a jug of water, spoke over it, sprinkled me with a little, and said, "Come out of this form into your original form." I turned back into my original form. I kissed her hand and said to her, "I want you to enchant my wife as she enchanted me." She gave me some water and said, "When you see her sleeping, sprinkle this water on her, and she will become what you wish." I found her sleeping, sprinkled the water on her, and said, "Come out of this form into the form of a mule." She immediately turned into a mule, and this is the mule you see before you, O Sultan and Chief of the Jinn. He then turned to the mule and said, "Is this true?" The mule nodded her head and indicated yes. When he finished his story, the genie trembled and granted him a third of the blood. The merchant thanked the sheiks, and they congratulated him on his safety, and each returned to his home and family. Thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the like button to support us. Thank you.